Maayong hapon mga kapaglaom, last week diri sa atong programa, we talked about how sometimes sa atong kinabuhi, there are just certain events that happen, big or small, like for example, disaster events na posible na ay dako nga impact sa ato ang mga kinabuhi to the point nga mustop ang atong mga lives, atong regular nga ginabuhat or ang atong mga routine suddenly just stops. And this afternoon mga kapaglaom, hisgutan nato particularly unsay impact aning mga disaster events like typhoon, earthquakes, or just like now, volcanic eruptions, unsa iyaha nga direct impact sa ato ang mental health. Kana atong pagaisgutan diri lang sa ADRATV.
Hello, ADRATV viewers. I am Dr. Cheryl Ann Castillo, a guidance counselor and a faculty member in the Psychology Department of the Adventist University of the Philippines. And I am excited to share with you some thoughts, some concepts about PFA. So from the last episode, there were questions thrown at us about psychological first aid. Like, what is psychological first aid and what are its core actions? Psychological first aid is a humane act to people, especially to those who are victims of large-scale and small-scale disasters. What are its core actions? What do you do when you conduct PFA? With PFA, we have 3 core actions such as look, listen, and link. Now, what happens if a person or a victim of a large-scale or small-scale disaster has not received any intervention such as PFA? There is a likelihood that the trauma experienced from the disaster may linger and may endure for a long period of time that may cause further or exacerbated psychological and mental health issues. And these issues, examples of these issues are ASD or acute stress disorder and PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. These are similar disorders with some set of symptoms depending on the time range, and this will be further discussed in our episode. Now, there is also a growing concern or a stigma in the Christian community that if a person experiences some mental health issues or mental health problems, that means that person may not be prayerful enough, may not be religious enough. That means that person does not believe in God or does not come to God. Is it true? Well, this is a misconception because while there is a strong relationship between spirituality and mental health, those who experiences mental health problems does not necessarily mean that these persons are not religious. In fact, many persons who may have symptoms of depressions or anxiety may have spent so much time praying and consulting God about their problems. These and many more are the things that we will share with you in this episode. If you have more questions, please feel free to comment your questions down below and we will be more than glad to answer these questions for you. Thank you, and I'll see you all for ADRATV.
Thank you very much, Doc Cheryl Castillo. Doc Cheryl has been a very great jud kaayo nga help and of course a resource person diri sa especially sa ato ang second season sa Disaster Ready Church. Mga kapaglaom, welcome once again sa inyong Monday Tambayan mao ang ADRATV. And we would like to welcome you all to the second episode sa ato ang season 2 sa hashtag Disaster Ready Church. Mga kapaglaom, last week or katong niagi no atong gihisgutan sa episode 1 unsa ang psychological first aid o nganong kailangan pud nato ang psychological first aid. It was a brief or a short introduction of what the next episodes will be, but karon na episode mga kapaglaom, we will dig deeper as mentioned by Doc Cheryl na ay mga pipila ka mga mental health disorders nga likelihood no posible nga maangkon sa usa ka tawo nga naka-eksperyensya og usa ka disaster or traumatic nga event. So dili pa nato na padayunon nga hisgutanon mga kapaglaom, we would like to greet everybody, especially sa tanan nagalantaw pinaagi sa ato ang Facebook dira sa Hope Channel South Philippines. Maayong hapon, maayong buntag or maayong udto, kadlawon or unsa man galing ang oras dira sa inyo, especially sa atong mga OFWs all over the world. Maayo, we're hoping nga maayo pod ang inyohang kahimtang. And also dira pod sa atong YouTube page. And gusto pod nato abi-abihon ang tanan mga kapaglaom gatan-aw pod dira sa Facebook page sa ADRA Philippines. And sa ato ang mga viewers diri gikan lokal pinaagi gatan-aw sa sa local antenna channel 25, and to everybody that's watching also sa Parasat Cable channel 17 and our nationwide coverage GSA 37. Welcome sa atong programa diri sa ADRA TV. And mga kapaglaom ha, kung aduna mo'y mga pangutana, kung naamoy mga clarifications, please do message us right now dira sa comment section. Mga kapaglaom, sa wala nakabalo or sa nakabalo na, ang Mayon volcano no murag ubay-ubay gyud pod ang ihanang epekto sa mga residente nga duol diadto sa bulkan. And for the last couple of weeks mga kapaglaom, ginamonitor pod siya sa atong gobyerno. So si ADRA as a humanitarian agency and of course at the same time as a development nga agency, ato pong gitanaw ang mga kahimtang sa mga residente diadto. And pinaagi sa inyohang suporta sa atong mga angels, sa atong mga donors, pinaagi pod sa suporta sa Southern Asia Pacific Division and sa suporta pod sa North Philippine Union Conference or NPUC o ang kontribusyon pod sa SLM or Southern Luzon Mission nakahimo ta sa pagresponde alang diadto sa mga residente. Pipila ka mga panimalay, pipila ka mga pamilya ang nakadawat og cash assistance. Pwede jud kaayo nila magamit samtang ang uban gi-evacuate mga kapaglaom ug naa karon sa mga evacuation centers. And for that mga kapaglaom, adunay pinasahi nga report ang atong mga kaubanan sa Hope Channel diadto gikan sa North Philippine Union Conference. Ato ning tan-awon.
Narito ako ngayon sa Evacuation Center sa San Jose Elementary School, Malilipot, Albay, kung saan ang Adventist Development and Relief Agency or ADRA ay mahagi ng tulong pinansyal sa halos 1,000 sambahayan na naapektuhan na aktibidad ng Bulkang Mayon. Nitong mga nagdaang linggo, nakaranas ang Albay ng matinding pag-aalboroto ng Bulkang Mayon na nagresulta sa paglikas ng mga residente sa kanilang mga tahanan upang masiguro ang kaligtasan ng kanilang pamilya. Upang matugunan ang kanilang pangangailangan, pinili ng ADRA Philippines kasama ang Southern Luzon Mission na magsagawa ng isang immediate response cash assistance.
Kami po sa ADRA ay bilang humanitarian arm ng Seventh-day Adventist Church. Kami po ang tumutugon when in terms of disaster po, nagre-response po kami. Meron din po kaming mga development projects all around the Philippines. Kasalukuyan po nandito po kami ngayon sa Legazpi, Albay dahil nga po sa pag-alboroto ng Mayon Volcano. So, nagbigay po kami ng cash assistance dito. May dalawang lugar po tayo na napili, yung pong evacuation ng San Jose at saka ng Santo Domingo.
Layunin din ito na ipahayag ang mahalagang papel na ginagampanan ng organisasyong ito sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng malasakit at suporta sa mga apektadong komunidad.
Mula sa mga residente na nakatira sa 6 at 8 kilometer danger zone ng Mount Mayon, isa si Evelyn Bigka sa mga nakatanggap ng cash assistance mula sa ADRA.
Kami po ay nakatira dito sa loob po ng 3 weeks na po. Nagpapasalamat po kami sa mga tumulong po sa amin. Kasi po, sapat po yung pagkain na binigay sa amin, saka po yung mga gamit sa bahay, tulad po ng tubig, mga banig, kumot. Maraming salamat po sa ADRA kasi po kahit po paano, mas malaking tulong na po yun sa amin. Katulad po sa akin, nagtitinda, pandagdag puhunan na po yun.
Nasa 750 pamilya mula sa Barangay Fidel Sultida, San Fernando, Calbayog at Bicol ay nakatanggap ng 1,500 piso. Ito ay makakatulong sa kanila na mabili ang kanilang pangangailangan habang sila ay wala pa sa kanilang mga tahanan.
Papasalamat po ako sa tulong ng ADRA na dala dito sa aking kabarangay dahil malaking tulong po 'yun. Napakalaking tulong po sa mga constituents ko ng Barangay Calbayog.
Galing from NPUC, then ADRA ay isang malaking tulong po sa isang pamilya upang mabili nila yung kanilang kailangan. Kung damit, kung sabon, kung ano man. Kaya maganda po itong ginawa ng ADRA sa panahong ito na natutuwa yung mga pamilya na nakatanggap dahil sila po ay may pera. Magbibili sila ng kanilang dapat bilihin.
Mula dito sa probinsya ng Albay at may layunin makapagatid ng mga balitang may dalang pag-asa, James Matthew Burse, nag-uulat para sa Hope Today, NPUC News.
Mga kapaglaom, last episode, we talked a little or a brief introduction sa psychological first aid, no? But, karon nga episode, for today's episode, mga kapaglaom, we will dig deeper kung unsa ba gyud ang impact sa disaster events sa atong hunahuna, sa ato ang mental health. And mga kapaglaom, I personally would like to know and understand deeply pa yun on this discussion. Now, we're so happy, I'm so happy, we're very fortunate. We have a mental health professional that will explain to us at talagang, magtatagalog pala ako, no? At talagang ipapa-understand niya sa atin, no? There are terminology sometimes that's very hard to understand. Pero para po sa inyo, para po sa atin, tatagain po natin yan. So the mental health professional that we are with is a registered guidance counselor. She works as a faculty in the psychology department and guidance counselor at the same time in the Adventist University of the Philippines. She finished her PhD in psychology still at AUP, and she's married to Pastor Castillo with 3 beautiful children. Ang ating pong guest for this afternoon is Doc Cheryl Ann Castillo. Hello po, Doc.
Hi.
Finally in the flesh.
Yes, in the flesh.
Yes. So, why I'm saying this, because mga kapaglaom, we were able to work together on a project. If you remember that,
Yeah.
Stronger Together Plus.
Yes, that's right.
During the pandemic, and si Doc po yung isa sa mga naging resource person po natin on psychological first aid. Now, Doc, Disaster Ready Church is on its 2nd season. This is our 2nd episode, and we would like to really understand paano ba naaapektuhan yung mental health talaga natin, yung mind natin when disaster events happen. And also sa part po mga kapaglaom, bakit yung iba okay lang?
Yeah.
Tapos yung iba, hindi. So parang yun po yung magiging discussion natin. So mga kapaglaom, if you have questions, and if you'd like to share also your experiences, then do comment it now dira sa Facebook, and we will try to accommodate those questions also. Doc Cheryl, first question ko po talaga, why does it have an impact? Bakit hindi lang like physical lang yung epekto ng disasters sa isang tao?
Because yung experience ng disaster itself, meron siyang mga accompanying experiences also. For example, merong trauma because you have seen or witnessed death, o di kaya pag may mga bombing or yung pain or suffering, you have witnessed that. So, so hindi lang yung disaster yung pinag-uusapan natin, the trauma experience. Another reason is, for example, experience of loss and grief. Kung mawalan kayo ng bahay, or mamatay ang loved one, or significant others, mawalan ng trabaho and other resources. And also, there's disruption in our daily life. Pag, for example, kapag may bagyo, usually nawawalan ng kuryente, nawawalan ng transportation, etc. And all these together, dun sa disruption in itself, nasisevere din yung ating capacity to cope. Because these are things that we don't normally or usually deal with, diba? So, araw-araw ganito yung ginagawa mo, and then there's this, all this together. So, talagang affected ang ating mental health.
Ayun. Para ba, kumbaga, Doc, parang ito yung life mo.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, parang may bumuhos na
Exactly.
grabe na.
And you were not prepared for it.
Exactly.
Like, so this is what I have prepared. Unlike pag alam mo na umulan, you have umbrella. But then, in a disastrous event, which normally hindi naman natin alam kapag mangyari sila, and we don't know how it will affect us. Sari-sari yan. Everything together. So, parang, this is not something I did not see coming, I have not prepared for.
Unexpected
Very
talaga.
unexpected. And together, ito lang yung kaya ko eh. Pero, with a disastrous event, ang daming kailangan mong i-deal with. And, hindi kaya ng resources natin. Personally. So talagang merong effect sa mental health.
What I'm getting here, Doc, is that if this happens to us, parang in a way, it's a normal reaction for
That's
the body
right.
and the mind.
Yes,
Oh.
yes.
Kasi baka ang weak ko naman, baka
No.
may ganun. Doc.
Yeah, no. Yeah, pag at the onset of a disaster, kung halimbawa ma-experience mo na parang na lost ka, hindi ka makapag-concentrate, or na-sad ka, naging irritable ka, at the onset, those are actually normal reactions to an abnormal event. Mas abnormal actually kung wala kang maramdaman regarding that. Mas abnormal if you feel na okay lang ako. Because you know, it's not okay. I mean, you're not okay. Definitely, you will not be okay. Kasi disaster yan. I mean, namatayan ka.
Opo. Nawalan ka.
Oo, and all. And you will say, it's okay. No, it's not okay.
Dito talaga papasok yung it's okay
Not to be okay. Yeah.
Especially on the onset of disaster. I
Yes.
would like to catch up on what you said, Doc. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal
Abnormal
event.
event. Yeah.
So, let's not be hard on ourselves.
Yes.
Don't know na, sige, nangyari to. Pero it was, for example, sabi niyo, Doc, it's a reaction, like, for example, onset, like sa start.
Yes.
Pero yung bakit po, nagiging parang, it really gets into a person, it becomes a really a big issue.
Yes. For some, no?
Yes, for some.
Oo.
And bakit po
And
yung iba, okay,
That's right.
and then yung iba, hindi pa din okay.
Yes, because we have different reactions to an event. Depende lang rin with a lot of other factors. For example, depende sa severity ng disaster. Kung yung iba, depende sa severity ng disaster, depende rin sa kung ano yung nawala sa'yo. So, iba din. Similarly, kapag may namatayan, di ba, yung reaction mo different if the person is really, really close to you, as compared to someone na parang distant relative mo, na hindi mo naman masyadong nakikita, iba din yung reaction mo. Now, aside from the severity itself, magdi-differ pa din based on sa situation ng isang tao prior to the disaster. So, kasi iba-iba tayo. For example, depende sa resilience ng tao. Meron talagang mga tao na mas resilient than the others.
Ano po yung resilience?
Parang
big word, no?
Resilience is the capacity to stand up after a fall. Merong mga tao that they find it easy to like just, okay, shrug it off and I'm
Bounce
okay.
off.
Oo. Pero yung iba, difficult for them. Okay, so that's one. Depende rin sa personality because there are some individuals that it's easy for them to see good things or positive things out of the situation. Pero merong iba na no, they find it difficult to see that, and it's personality difference. Meron na ring mga biological factors. For example, kapag at risk ka na for depression or anxiety prior to the disaster, or prior to the disaster, nakaka-experience ka na talaga ng mga anxiety symptoms, medyo maalalahanin ka na talaga, nagwo-worry ka na kahit walang disaster. When crisis strikes, the more that those symptoms mas mapapakita siya. Just like yung na-experience natin, for example, COVID-19 pandemic, right? It's a crisis, no? So marami sa mga nakausap ko ng mga students, doon lumabas talaga yung kanilang depression or anxiety, and it's not only because of COVID-19. It was because prior to the pandemic, meron na rin silang mga symptoms, pinagdadaanan at mga difficulties, and yung COVID-19 parang nagpalala or nagkaroon sila ng reason para mas manifest yun kasi it's a traumatic event.
Hearing you, Doc, explaining on like a past experience or a past struggle or maybe biological or personality.
That's right.
It really, I hope sa ating mga kapaglaong nakikinig, sorry, yung Tagalog ko nga. Nakadungog bang gusto mo. I mean, I hope we become kinder and more understanding to the people around us.
Exactly.
We really do not know what's happening inside.
Yeah, siguro the bottom line is not all of us are the same. Diba? Meron tayong iba't ibang mga pinagdadaanan. Iba't iba rin yung resources natin. Kaya similar sa mga tao na of course kapag mas mayaman ka, mas mabibili mo yan. Of course, pag mas mayaman ka, mas makakapunta ka dyan. So, it actually is different. So, we cannot tell people na, para yun lang, ako nga. Diba?
True! Kasi meron mga times like, Sendong, it was a major disaster sa Cagayan de Oro City. And people like, nabahaan ka? Nabahaan din naman ako, nawalan ka, nawalan din, parang OA ka.
That's right.
Parang okay lang. So, hindi pala ganun.
Yes, that's actually parang quite an insensitive remark, if you must say, no? Kasi hindi natin alam kung saan sila nanggagaling.
Ano yung pinagdada. Pero Doc, yung pinaka-question ko din, I'm really interested how you will answer this. In a disaster event, pag may like believers who believe in God, who have faith on Him, may mga religious practices, ganon. Is it still possible that they get affected mentally? Kasi parang sinasabi, maybe you're not praying that.
That's right.
Paano po yan, Doc?
That's really a very interesting question, and I like that you asked that kasi it's one way to also correct the belief of other people. So the direct answer is yes. Even if you have a religion, even if you go to church every week or 3 times a week, and yes, you can still experience or pwede pa rin magkaroon ng mental health issue.
How do?
Why? Because yung factor naman for mental health issue is not just one. It's multifactorial. Meron tayong tinatawag na bio-psycho-socio-spiritual model. Okay? So, of explanation of mental health. Ang mental health risk, merong biological factor, meaning genetics, right? Or pwede ring organic, meron talagang part ng body sa brain natin, may nagka-problema, so hindi masyadong nakaka-produce ng mga neurotransmitters or hormones na kailangan para mas maging masaya ka, para mas maging maganda yung well-being mo, so that's biological factor. It's something we cannot control, di ba? Meron din tayong tinatawag na psychological factors like yung personality differences natin. Pwede din yung difference ng belief about certain things. Sociological is like yes, relationship. Merong mga tao na may problema with family kahit na may active sila sa church, they still have family problems or relational problems, job problems, problema sa job, and also meron tayong sociological problems, and of course spiritual din. So all this together, yung varying degree nitong mga different facets na to and factors will contribute. So, yun yung mga tinatawag nating risk factors. Kung mas matataas. Another is, since we're talking about disaster, which is trauma, no? Kapag naka-experience ka ng traumatic event, it could also impact. Say, halimbawa, bata ka pa, na-experience mo na yung different kinds of disaster or abuse and all. It adds to it. Diba? So, kaya it's not as if you pray then everything is good, everything is okay. It's not that, kasi hindi lang naman isang factor ang nagde-determine ng ating risk for mental health issues and disorders. But on the other hand, I would also like to say na kapag meron kang religion, if you believe in God, it buffers. It lessens the risk. I have talked to several individuals, like just recently, we had a medical mission sa mga indigent people, sa mga mangyans. And I've asked them, so dito sa mga problems niyo, what makes you feel good? Ano yung nagpapalakas sa inyo? And they said it's praying and it's believing in God. So we cannot say entirely na a person who is experiencing mental health struggle is dahil sa hindi sila nagpe-pray or dahil wala si God sa buhay nila. Because we don't know how much prayer this person uttered, has had on a daily basis. Kasi nga because of what they're going through, diba? But then, to balance things out, proven na rin through research and several studies na if we believe in God and yung church family also, yung promises in the Bible and praying, these are also parang good coping skills, good factors that will buffer or lessen the severity of our take on crisis events.
Ayun. Thank you very much, Doc, on making sure that it's balanced
Yeah.
in a way, no? Especially to our kapaglabs that are listening right now. Na maybe they felt like, or they're like blaming themselves, like, why do I feel this way when I know that this is like, so it's really more than what we think it is. So, Doc, meron po talaga like a small percentage of individuals who undergo disaster events na nakakaranas talaga ng mental health disorders, or eventually they develop a mental health disorder, and two of which na parang na-research ko is ASD, or baka may gusto kang i-add, Doc. ASD, or acute stress disorder, and PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's talk first about ASD. Ano po bang ASD?
Alright, sige. Before I discuss that, tama naman na talagang ASD and PTSD yung talagang like connected after a disaster, kasi yung definition itself ng ASD and PTSD is related to the trauma experience. So, related siya sa trauma. But then again, marami pa rin tayong mga mental health disorders na pwedeng ma-experience ng mga tao after a disastrous event. Depende pa rin doon sa kung saan sila nanggaling. For example, like what I said earlier, prior to the disaster, meron ka ng mga depressive symptoms. So, mas magi-increasing likelihood na makadevelop ka ng major depressive disorder or MDD. So, prior to the disaster, meron ka ng anxiety, magiging anxious ka na, maalalahanin ka na sa mga quizzes, sa mga exams, and every part of your life, pinag-aalalahanan mo na. Then, when disaster comes, mas magi-increasing likelihood na mag-manifest ang anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, for example, diba? So, depende doon sa risk mo prior to the experience of disaster. But I would also like to correct na hindi naman lahat ng nakaka-experience ng disaster could experience or could have a mental health disorder. Alright? Kasi depende nga yan, some nakaka-recover din sila agad. So now let's talk about ASD. Ang ASD or acute stress disorder is a diagnosable disorder doon sa mga tao na naka-experience ng trauma. Alright? So, kaya magpapakita ng mga symptoms na related doon sa acute stress disorder. Ano ba yun? So, for example, after 3 days, masasabi natin na ASD siya or acute stress disorder kung 3 days to 1 month after a disaster or after a traumatic event, magpapakita ng mga different symptoms. Alright? So, what are the symptoms? It could be varied symptoms according to these 4 areas. Number 1, merong intrusion. Intrusion means pabalik-balik na mga thoughts about the disaster. Yung mga, many of them ay, what do you call this? Hindi uncontrollable. Hindi siya, parang for example, nakaupo ka lang dyan, tapos biglang andyan sa mind mo, na naiisip mo palagi yung event. Or sa dreams mo, paulit-ulit, there's recurring dreams na nangyayari yon. So that's intrusion. Yung thought mo palaging occupied nung traumatic event. And then another, of course, sa emotions, merong negative emotions. Nalulungkot ka, yan. So, usually sad, or may down, or may feelings of guilt, or may feelings of shame, etc. So, may presence ng negative emotions. And then, another is yung mga tinatawag nating dissociative symptoms or dissociation. Parang nalolos ka sa reality. Parang, for example, pwedeng iniisip mo pa rin na nangyayari yun kahit in real life wala na. Okay? Or pwede naman na meron kang mga iniisip na mga bagay or meron kang ginagawa as if nandun ka sa isang situation that is not actually currently happening. So, wala ka doon sa current reality, parang iba yung naiisip mo or kesa sa nangyayari sa paligid mo. And then, may avoidant, yung talagang pinipilit mong i-avoid yung situation. Say, for example, hindi ka makabalik. Ayaw mong pumunta where the disaster happened. Now, you have difficulty coming back and going back there. Or di kaya, just the mere mention, for example, of the bagyo. Di ba? Parang makarinig ka lang ng pangalan na Betty. Yung recently, Betty, makarinig ka. Di ba? So, nasa-stress ka na. So, talagang gusto mong i-avoid yung mga ganon. And yung tinatawag nating arousal, yung may startle effect, or di kaya...
maliit na ano lang.
Parang, ganyan. O di kaya, natutulog ka, tapos biglang may sleep disturbance, magigising ka lang agad. And then, kasama na rin dun sa arousal yung irritable ka palagi. Ano ba yan? Bakit ganyan? Etc. So, with all these symptoms, tapos, nangyari siya 3 days after a disaster, up to 1 month or at least 4 weeks, then we can say that it's probably acute stress disorder. Which means na pwede pala, like what we said earlier, at the onset, normal reaction yung maging irritable ka, malas concentration, disturbed. So there are individuals who could get over that into like 3 days and you're good. Oo. Pag bumalik na yung kuryente, okay ka na, 'di ba? Kapag nakabalik ka na doon sa place mo, okay ka na after disaster. But then, merong iba pag magpo-prolong siya ng 3 days up to 1 month, then we can say na it could be acute stress disorder.
So, Doc, yung PTSD naman, Doc.
Yeah.
So, sa PTSD, para
ma-differentiate natin, 'di ba? You know, actually, ang primary na differentiation or difference ng ASD to PTSD is yung time element and duration. So, kung halimbawa, ASD is from 3 days to 1 month, according to pag 1 month onwards, that's PTSD. So, similar yung symptoms. Oo. So, but you cannot say, post-traumatic stress. Yan. So, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin agad na post-traumatic stress. It could be ASD. And then, kapag nag-pervade siya or pag lumampas siya ng 1 month and onwards, na present pa rin yung mga ganong symptoms, then we can say that's PTSD. So, yung duration, pwede ring severity, bilang pag ASD kasi mas saglit lang siya, parang onset reaction halos pa din, pero merong iba kasi na nakaka-recover from ASD. So, pero kapag nag-linger siya, then PTSD. So, pwede nating masabi na mas well-established kasi yung diagnosis ng post-traumatic stress disorder. Unlike pag ASD, we can say na after a traumatic event, okay, so ASD yan pag after 1 month. Pero it may or it may not transition into PTSD.
talaga. Meron talagang dyan lang siya. So, it's more of the time element, mga kapaglaom. So, dili din may mga PTSD na diretso.
Exactly.
Oo. Okay. How, I would like to bring this up. It's not on the questions, no, but ang hirap po, di ba? Kasi pag nag-label tayo agad.
That's right.
Ano po yung impact niya when we label? I mean, it's important that we understand and we are aware of what's happening. Pero ano po yung parang dangerous side of labeling people then also to?
Yes, kasi number 1, siguro yung number 1 danger, lalo na sa ibang mga tao, baka mislabel naman yan.
Okay.
Diba? Kasi hindi naman yan tama. So, hindi naman pwedeng sabihin mo na kaagad. Hindi natin pwedeng sabihin, ay, nalulungkot ako, ay, depression yan. Diba?
Yes. Automatic na yun.
Kasi kahit sa amin, like sa psychologists, in our practice, we still need to see whether, kahit nga actually, for example, nakaka-experience ka ng symptoms ng intrusion or ng pabalik-balik siya, hindi lang kasi yan yung symptom para ma-consider that a person has ASD. It should have a presence of all these factors. So, kung hindi kompleto, meron siyang intrusive thought, pero wala naman siyang dissociation, pero wala naman siyang negative emotion. Okay pa rin naman siya, masaya pa rin naman siya. So, we cannot say that it is ASD. So, much more, we cannot say that it is PTSD. Diba? So, kahit sa amin, we, in our practice, we are still very careful to see na, wait, eto ba talaga yon, diba? Because all the factors must be present. Yung parang mga diagnosing criteria, dapat nandun para natin masabing ganun. So, when we mislabel people, number 1, yon. When we label people, number 1, there's a tendency na baka mali naman yung labeling natin. Pangalawa, of course, it nagkikreate ng negative impact on the person na parang mas magsasabi siya na, talaga pa? May PTSD ba talaga ako? And we don't know, diba? So, we have to be careful. Kahit sa sarili din natin.
True.
Wag natin i-label agad.
Ang dami sa self-diagnose.
Exactly. Mag-self-diagnose sila. Baka ngayon, sinabi natin, these are the... meron na akong
Opo, May na-meet po nga ako, she's a teenager, and sabi niya, may bipolar ako. Sabi ko, oh, really? And our young people are very informed these days.
Exactly.
So parang, dapat ma-strike pa din yung balance. Pero of course, the labeling or the diagnosing must be done by
a professional. Yeah. Marami din, kahit ako marami din ako mga client na parang, I have this, I have that, okay. So, we have to see the symptoms and all.
Kung papasa ba kay DSM-5?
Exactly. It's good to be informed.
Yes.
Number 1, at least alam mo, diba? Kasi yung ibang mga nakakausap ko naman, for the most part, tama sila. I mean,
True.
Yun din, kasi sarili mo yan Ikaw nakakaramdam ng mga symptoms mo. For the most part, tama sila. Pero mas maganda pa rin na mas ma-confirm natin siya. And not just label yourself or label other people with this just because you have Googled it.
Ayun. Thank you. Google talaga. Doc, thank you very much. Especially sa part ng difference ng ASD and then ng PTSD. This might be my last question, Doc. What if a disaster survivor is listening now? And then parang nati-check ba yung discussion natin? what if you really have the disorder, no?
Mhm.
Ano po yung hope nila if somebody's listening now? Parang meron, and then nagka-impact na parang kahit after a year of from the disaster, or may nangyari talaga, and it's really parang na-change talaga din siya. Ano pong hope na pwede natin na-send sa kanila?
Oh, of course, there's always hope after the disaster, no? What we can do is to really be proactive into yung sa healing process natin. Kung halimbawa affected sila, nalaman nila na ay parang nga na until now I'm still bothered by this experience, ganyan. Hanggang ngayon naisip ko pa rin, parang feeling ko araw-araw babagyo, ganun ba? So, kung may mga ganun, I think number one, we have to be more proactive. First is, if it's really difficult and you think that yung mga nararamdaman mo qualifies for a diagnosis, seek for a professional help. Maganda rin talaga na mas malaman natin. And of course, kung meron kasing mga tao, social support is also important. Kaya dapat kapag nalulungkot tayo, as much as possible, mas kayanin natin na hindi mag-isolate. That is also why effective din yung pagkakaroon ng religion. Kasi church family is your protective factor. When you go to church, at least you can talk to, diba? To someone. Like sa atin ngayon, disaster-ready church, diba? So that's a good So, ibig sabihin, you can talk to church members na, that they have been informed about this, and many, lalo na yung nabigyan natin ng PFA training. Alam na nila kung papaanong mag-deal with it.
Listen.
Yeah. So doon sa mga yun, pwede natin silang makausap. So, social support is really very important. Ganun din, there are a lot of studies that show na yung mga acts of altruism lessens mental health risk.
Volunteer talaga kay ADRA.
That's right. Good thing to promote also yung ating mga ADRA angels dyan, no? Hindi, pero totoo yun. Like, we have a lot of studies that would back up na kapag when you do altruistic acts, it lessens your risk for mental health.
Ano yung altruism daw?
Yung altruism is like yung love for other people. Yan. So,
yung parang mas iniisip mo sila.
Yeah. So, yung mga volunteer services natin dyan, it helps. It really helps. So, yun din. So, what I say is we have to be more proactive. Another is, of course, kailangan natin ng self-care and self-compassion. Self-care meaning you do healthy stuff, alright? I have to correct. It should be healthy stuff na magpapa-improve ng well-being mo. Like, number one, yung new start natin, nutrition. Hindi dapat sugary. Akala kasi nila, self-care, inom ako ng milk tea. Self-care ice cream. Kasi sugar is
sabotage
also
yun,
yung pag mag-increase, yung increase ng sugar intake din ay nakakapag-increase ng likelihood for mental health
the gut and mind
So dapat healthy food din, and then you sleep well, exercise especially.
Super talaga na depression killer.
Exactly. Kasi pag nag-exercise tayo, mas yung brain natin nagpo-produce ng neurotransmitter na that would make us, happier. Yan. So exercise and yung
sunlight,
yes, yung mga ganyan. Yung sa mga healthy habits, self-care, yan. When it comes to self-compassion, it basically means being kinder to yourself. Kasi most of the time, we are kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. Diba? It's easy for us to tell our friends, ay, okay lang yan, diba?
Hindi mo kaya sabihin sa sarili mo.
But it's something you cannot tell yourself. How come? Diba? So, I think it's about time we also tell ourselves it's okay. Diba? kung hanggang ngayon nagsasuffer ka pa rin mentally because of that, forgive yourself every day. Kasi bawat tao may iba't ibang time frame. So you don't have to be hard on yourself. Ay, ano ka ba? Ang weak mo talaga. And you tell several other bad things to yourself. Like, wala kang kwenta, hindi, para yan lang, hindi mo magawa. It's something you don't even want to tell other people, but you tell yourself. So, self-compassion is being kinder to yourself.
To stop yung negative na self-talk
Yeah.
kapag mga lingering thoughts so that it's there.
Yeah.
Akala, di ba may times, Doc, na parang lingering lang, yung parang andyan, pero hindi mo naman dinidismiss. And then at the end of the day, the little things really add up. And then all of a sudden, you just feel that.
Because you know what? The thing is, kapag yun ang palaging yung mga negative thoughts na yon naglilinger sa brain natin, it becomes automatic. Yung meron tayong tinatawag na neurons that fire together, wire together. So, for example, mag-entertain ka ng certain thought in your brain na I'm ugly, ganyan, or I'm good for nothing. So, nakakreate ka na ng map in your brain that
Yun na yung
automates
the
that.
pathway.
Na pathway na parang konting bagay lang na mangyayari sa'yo, yun na kaagad yung automatic. Kaya meron tayong maraming automatic response. Especially, for example, kapag halimbawa, learning a skill, di ba? Kapag meron tayong mag-play ng piano and we do it every time, gagawin mo na siya even without looking at the keys. Ganon din sa mga thoughts natin. When you think about it, it's like, it occupies your brain. Kahit wala ka namang ginagawa, automatic na yun. So, we have to change that into more positive thoughts.
And then, it's so hard to break those yung habit na ano. So, mga kapaglaom, or to everybody that's listening, thank you so much, Doc Cheryl, for making us understand even more na when individuals go through, or us, I mean, I believe nobody's exempted. Siguro yung mga disaster events, meron ding mga mini disasters at home.
Yes, exactly.
Sa ating mga relationships, it's something that nangyayari din sa atin. Our mind gets affected, but there's hope.
Yes.
As sabi pa ni Doc, and there are actual things that we can do that can help us also. Doc, last message na po. Sa lahat ng nanonood, last message in light to our discussion this afternoon.
Siguro what I can say is like, in the experience of disaster, mas madaling makarecover if we are a community. Yan number one. Na as a community, tayong hindi nakaka-experience nun, we have to be more caring and we have to be more responsive to the needs of other people. I remember that when we conducted PFA doon sa mga dun sa Taal volcano eruption, those whom we have interviewed said, even yung tagline na Bangon Batangas, it helped them, you know, and it's good for the cause of ADRA na kahit pala yung mga ganong taglines lang, kahit yung act of giving or act of letting other people know that we care, we are here, that help is available, that alone, you know, it is a significant act para matulungan yung ibang tao. And for those who have experienced disaster, remember that help is always available. Meron tayong mga disaster response teams for one. And number two, kahit sa'yo rin, sa sarili mo, you have your own resources to get through it. No, the thing, we just have to tap
on it.
Yes, we just have to tap those resources na
mga drawers.
Na kaya mo, you have it, 'di ba? Kaya mo, you can have, you just have to be proactive into how to deal with it. Na hindi natin, nawalan ako ng bahay, nawalan ako ng trabaho, and I'll just sit here. But, you know, there are beautiful things that can happen. Ang dami kong nalaman na nawalan sila ng trabaho because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Dili na ako ma-name tanan. Now, mga kapaglaom, pasalamatan usab pud nato ang atong leadership diri sa South Philippine Union Conference ang atong presidente Pastor Danielo Palomares, atong communications director Pastor Roxy Pido. Thank you very much. Kuya John Sir Joe Kalibod, ato ang manager, and ato pong executive producer Ate Charm Sinining. And of course, atong mga volunteers, no, na kanunay gyud pod andam dira sa pagserbisyo sa atong Ginoo pinaagi sa media ministry. Mga kapaglaom, gusto pod namo mo pasalamatan because you have allowed us to enter into your homes and to have this meaningful conversations and discussions that will prepare us when disaster comes. Hashtag Disaster Ready Church, mga kapaglaom. Hashtag Ready with ADRA. Hashtag Agra Angels. Pinaagi aning Disaster Ready Church nga initiative, mga kapaglaom, kung moabot manggaling ang kalamidad, and we are sure nga moabot mangyud siya, no? We will be ready and we will know what to do, not just physically but also especially psychologically. Thank you very much everyone for tuning in, and ayaw na mo balhin og channel kay musunod na pod ang takna sa pagtuon, and then the nightly series. So mga kapaglaom, kita-kits next Monday diri lang sa ADRATV.